Name Isidora Romantini. I am a registered massage therapist here in Ontario, Canada, and I'm also a yoga teacher and Pilates instructor. I did have my own studio, my own wellness studio, that unfortunately, due to COVID, we had to shut down permanently.
Oh no.
Yeah, that was a tough decision to make, and we can talk about it later, but it was a necessary decision. But since I've had the studio, I've run a yoga teacher training program. For many years, I've been a part of yoga teacher training programs, like teaching the anatomy, biomechanics, physiology, all that kind of stuff. I've been part of faculties.
Yeah.
Right. But now before I opened the studio, I wrote my own program, 200-hour program. And since COVID, I've now converted it to completely online.
Oh, wow.
So that's my core business right now is running that. And that's in full swing. That's been running since September. And we'll be done in February. And I've got a really, really fantastic group of people. I'm
Amazing.
So pumped about it.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's been my focus in September. Even though, it's not, as far as energy is concerned, it's not the same amount of energy as I do it in person, because we would meet every weekend before. So now we're doing periodic Zoom meetings, and that's how we're doing the contact hours.
Yes.
So even though it's not necessarily taking up as much as my physical time, it's taking up still a lot of my brain time, which I love. So
right. And how did you determine the cadence for that? Because obviously, I've done teacher trainings for personal training, for example, and then it shifted completely to online, and then there's this, you miss that human touch, and then you try and do your best to still make those contact points. So how did you reconcile the fact that something like yoga does need a lot of skin to skin interaction as opposed to digital?
Yeah, good question. Well, see, my approach is, it's a little bit more contemporary. I actually don't teach physical adjustments.
Okay.
There's been in the last several years a lot that has surfaced as far as recognizing trauma and really respecting people's spaces and their bodies.
Yep.
So I went back in the day when I took my teacher training, a big chunk of it was, on-hand assists and rather aggressive assists.
Okay.
And that's how one of the injuries that I have, a shoulder injury that I have, is actually from an adjustment that I got from a very well-respected teacher and who I trusted. So teaching adjustments and things like that just didn't sit well with me. So I don't even have it in my program. So when it came time, when COVID hit, and at that time, I already had a handful of people signed up for my program. So this is back in February, March.
Yes.
I already had a handful of people signed up, and I thought, oh crap, what am I going to do? This is, these people are committed already.
Yes.
They've set aside, they've made the plans. How am I going to accommodate people? So my program is in 2 modules. So the first module is very theory heavy, very anatomy heavy. It's a lot of reading, a lot of learning, and applying those things that we learn about anatomy and how the body works to the asanas, to the yoga postures.
Yes.
So I thought module 1, pretty easy to transition to doing it online, because it's a lot of lectures, it's a lot of assignments.
It's theory, really, the theory piece.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, that's doable. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just do module 1 online and then shift module 2 to in-person, see what happens in the new year. And as things kept quickly unfolding, it just seemed that the reality was, we don't know when we're going to be able to get together in groups again.
Right.
And this is March, April, and I'm thinking, screw it, I'm just going to do everything online. I'll find a way, I'll figure it out. Plus, I also had people signed up at that point. More people were signing up people that were not in my area, like way,
So
like
cool.
8 hours north of me in Ontario. I had someone from out west. I had someone from the UK signed up. So I was like, okay, I really can't do module 2 in person. It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
so I got to figure out a way. So, I mean, it was a lot of work, a lot of looking at ways that I can navigate this in-person part to virtual. So a lot of it is, so module 2 is a lot of practice teaching. That's mainly what it is, you know, get on your mat, now get in front of a screen instead of in front of a crowd, and get to it. So basically I've taken the program that I did in person and I'm doing the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing, only virtually. So there, you know, when I widened my lens, and I looked at the bigger picture, I realized this actually can be done. It can be done.
Yes.
So yeah, absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
great.
You know, because I mean, when COVID hit, there was a lot of talk, because a lot of people, not a lot of people, but you know, yoga teacher training schools were shifting to going online, and there was a lot of criticism about that. And you know, that it's impossible and that you need the person-to-person contact. It can't be done without it. And I thought, okay, first of all, nothing's impossible.
Let's start there.
Right? If you put your mind to it, absolutely.
Yes.
If you put your mind to it, you'll figure out a way. Come hell or high water, you will figure out a way. And that's what I did. I was like, I sat down, I brainstormed, I thought, okay, how can this be done? And then when I kind of took the pressure off and took away the worry of being criticized, I was like, yeah, sure, this absolutely can be done. You just do it. That's all.
Yes. And imagine the person who thought 5 years ago about doing an online yoga class, how the community must have just fully rejected that notion, right? Like,
oh yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, no doubt there is a feeling of loss of not being in the practice room with your community. Absolutely. And you know, it's a reality. But that's just it. It's a reality. Accept it and move on. Like there's one thing. I mean, you can dwell in, you know, what could be, what we think should be, or we can have wishful thinking, but this is our reality right now. So rather than, you know, hoping and praying that things are going to get back to normal,
long gone.
It's long gone. So it's like, let's move on. Let's figure out a way to make this happen. Because here's the thing is that, you know, it's very clear to me, due to the fact that I have a good sized group of people that are taking my training. People still want to learn and people still want to become yoga teachers. It's just a different way now. That's all.
Exactly. You have so many hats that you wear. So I'm like, okay, yoga, check. Pilates.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so
how did you find Pilates? Let's start there.
Well, yeah, I've been doing Pilates since so I'm 47, so I'm an 80s child.
I'm 45.
Yeah, man.
Let's get it.
Wicked. Right. 80s all the way. So, I'm of the era of Jane Fonda and Windsor Pilates and all that kind of stuff. So it was always there for me. I didn't become a Pilates teacher. So I became an RMT first, that came first, and then a yoga teacher. And funny enough, all of it kind of just happened. It was, you know, I became a yoga teacher because someone said, hey, you should be a yoga teacher. I'm like, okay, sure, I'll do it for fun. Why not? And then for Pilates, I was working in a multidisciplinary clinic, and my mentor, I don't know if you know him, Mike Prebag. He's a chiropractor. Yeah, no, he's a freaking genius. And he taught me a lot of what I know and how I approach my treatments. And he said to me, you know, yoga's great, awesome, but you should really learn Pilates because it's awesome home care for your patients. And I was, that's literally, I was like, okay, I trusted the guy, you know, I mean, he's never been wrong so far in all the years that I've known him. So I was like, all right. So I, you know, registered with the Stop Pilates training, did that, and I've been doing it ever since. So that's been now 7 years that I've been teaching Pilates.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
and it's evolved quite a bit, actually.
Oh yeah, yeah. Who have you
Yeah.
learned from since taking your first start thing? Have you taken different workshops and taken CECs from different teachers out there? Not that I need you to name drop, but like different styles per se.
No. Yeah, yeah. Let me see.
I mean,
Well, in the
you can
beginning,
say names too. Like, it's not like don't worry.
in the beginning, I really stuck to the STOT approach and the STOT philosophy. But just as same thing as my yoga, it was more of a self-exploration, because some of the things, and I'm not dissing STOT, and actually a lot of the stuff that they teach now is they've updated their approach, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really drawn to just exploring things in my body, like taking the basic principles and then building on that and see how that works in my body, because
Yes.
there are some things, not only in Pilates but in everything else for that matter, in any kind of movement discipline, not everything works for everybody, right? So being open to changing things up and bending the rules a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So after, and just again through that self-exploration, I took actually one training that I took. It's not yoga or Pilates. It's DNS, Dynamic Neuromuscular Stabilization, through the Prague Rehabilitation School. And I took that actually more for my massage therapy education. But through taking that opened my eyes up in how I approach yoga and Pilates as well. So what I did is I would take the DNS principles and apply them into my personal practice and into my classes, and how I taught and how I treated my patients and how I gave them what I gave for their home care. Yeah. And the DNS principles, it's the main thing about DNS is that it's all about breath.
Okay.
And, in yoga, it's all about breath, but, what kind of breath? And I learned so much about the science of breath and how it works and how it affects literally everything in our bodies. So that has become almost like a cornerstone to the way I approach all of my modalities, is breath first.
No, I haven't. Sorry, I was gonna say, I haven't spent a lot of time focusing on breath, but I do know that's a very central tenet to Joseph Pilates' work as well. Like, were there moments where you're like, this guy is a genius if he was talking about this like 80 years ago, 90 years ago about breath? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, he was way ahead of his time. Absolutely, way ahead of his time as far as making breath, again, something that is, a focus, an essential, yes. However, what we've learned since then, and this is where STOT has updated their content, is where before we believe that drawing the navel in and up was, activating the core and giving us more stabilization. We now know that that's not the case. And by drawing things in and up actually can create more instability. Whereas with DNS, it's about the intra-abdominal pressure.
Yes.
So, gotcha. and that brings in more stability to the spine, and it's almost like your trunk becomes your central power station. And then from there, everything else can become more stable and strong. So everything comes from the breath first and then works out. And that was like, that made me go,
That was your game changer, right? Yeah.
Hold on a second here. So I'm supposed to expand out and hold that and not suck it in. Hold on a second. And then, from that, I realized how important it was to let your belly go if you're not doing anything, to relax and let the Buddha belly hang out, giving the chance for the nervous system to be able to distinguish between when to engage your core is necessary and when it isn't, right?
Yes.
And realizing that the core is actually reactive. And a lot of our stabilizing muscles in our spine are reactive. You know, they react to movement, and that's when they engage.
So,
do you know what I mean?
So
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to understand that. So they're reacting to movement. I've been taught that they initiate movement. Are we saying the same thing, or is that something different?
It's different.
Okay.
It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting. It's really interesting. And there's actually, I mean, there are studies. I mean, I can forward you the links and stuff, like
Sure.
from PubMed and stuff like that. But there's actual studies, like, for example, your deep spinal muscles, like your rotatories and multifidi,
Yes.
and your transversari, all of those tiny little muscles that are in between each vertebra.
Mm-hmm.
We are taught that, like, for example, I'll take the rotatories. They do rotation of the spine,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And the thing is, those deep stabilizing muscles don't actually initiate the rotation. It's the bigger muscles that initiate rotation, like your obliques,
Yes,
and things like that,
okay.
right?
I
They initiate. Okay, so they initiate that big movement of rotation. What the rotatories do is, yes, they rotate, but what they do is they actually react to the rotation so that you don't go too far.
Yes. Okay. Follow. Yeah, I got you. Yes.
Yeah. So that's how these deep spinal muscles work. And, you know, things like, even the same thing with, like, transverse abdominis. That's one muscle that you can't. And this is another thing too, that in Pilates, we're taught that the transverse abdominis you can engage on cue. And we now know that that's not the case.
Okay.
The transverse abdominis, our deepest abdominal muscle, is actually reactive. It engages when you're lifting something heavy.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
That's when it reacts to what is needed to keep the trunk stable.
Okay.
Right.
So then,
and then with that yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. I was going to say, so going back to the multifidus, for example, multifidi, I've understood too, like with those muscles, that would be those kind of stabilizing muscles, preventing too much movement in any range of motion. When our bigger muscles aren't doing their job, these smaller muscles take over, and that's when we get injuries.
You got it.
Okay. Gotcha. I follow you.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
All right. Yeah. It's the same thing with the rhomboids too, eh? That blew my mind when I found that out.
Yeah. Which makes sense.
Because we're taught that, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're taught that the rhomboids will help you strengthen your rhomboids and you'll get better posture.
Right.
Whereas actually the rhomboids react to the pecs pulling, right? They're fighting to bring the shoulder blades back. They don't actually, their primary movement is not retraction of the shoulder blades. And, you know, it says it in the textbooks. It says it in all the textbooks that rhomboids do retraction. Yes, they do, but they actually, they activate more when they react to keep to bring the shoulders back and not let them come forward. So that's why, and this is what's interesting too, from, you know, a clinical perspective, that's why there's so much tension back there, because the rhomboids are constantly fighting. They're constantly fighting to bring you back.
They're in a tug of war,
that upright posture.
With the anterior muscular chain.
You got it. That's why there's so much tension back there, because they're constantly working, so they get exhausted.
Yes.
Right? So it's more important, like, if you want to think about, you know, bringing the shoulder blades back, for example, and bringing the shoulder blades into our back per se, you know, you want to look at other muscles like serratus, but the 3 power shoulder stabilizers: serratus anterior, lats, and mid traps.
Yes.
If you want to give your rhomboids a break, do more pulling.
There you go.
Yeah, man.
Wow. Okay, so Pilates, check.
Yes.
So,
okay.
Kind of, sort of. We're gonna pull this together beautifully before the hour's out. So
I think so.
So your RMT work, like, where do you find, like, how did you decide that I'm gonna be an RMT and not, I don't know, a chiro or something like that? Why RMT?
Right. Well, I went back to school at, how old was I? 31 years old.
Nice. Which is a courageous thing to do.
It was one of those things where I was very unhappy with what I was doing, and I needed to shift. And so it was a lot of, like, was really random, actually. It was like, okay, I know I want to help people. I'm active. So I knew something to do with the body, but what?
Yes.
So I did a lot of Googling, like just putting in keywords and, you know, journal writing and things like that, like flow charts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so when I got to my computer and I started Googling, massage therapy kept popping up, right? And I was like, So I clicked on that, and then I went into the rabbit hole.
Yes.
Like, okay, all right, this might be something, okay, because it's only 2 years. I can handle 2 years. At 31 years old or 30 years old, I can handle 2 years. So I thought, okay, and I'm gonna help people. Like, this is something that's just, I think it's just in my DNA. Is that it? Yeah, exactly. So I did that, and funny enough, when all of this came to light, my husband was away on vacation. He was on a boys' cycling trip, and he called me one night, and he's like, "Oh, you know, just checking in. How are things going?" And I'm like, "I'm gonna go back to school." He's like, "What?" Okay, we'll talk about it when we get home. When I get home, and I was like, "No, I'm serious. I'm going back to school." So by the time he came home a couple weeks later, you know, I had done all my research, and I decided which school I wanted to go to. And it was freaking me out because I hadn't taken any science since I was 15 years old. In fact, I dropped out of grade 10 science.
Wow.
I hated science. Yeah. So I took, you know, the pre-admin course and exam and all that kind of stuff, and then went to school. And it was one of those things where it was like, A, I'm helping people, B, I can be my own boss.
Yes.
And that was something that really appealed to me. You know, I mean, yes, you still absolutely have to answer to people. You always do in life. But it was one of those things where, you know, I was at a point in my life where I was like, no, I don't want to have to answer to anybody but myself. I want to be fully responsible for my own success.
Yes.
So and so that was another thing that really, really appealed to me, because at the time I was, you know, the work that I was doing, I was making other people a lot of money. Well, that was nice.
I wanted to,
you know, and I didn't have to be rich.
No, yeah, because like that's when you said like responsible for your own success. There's a part of it too where I feel like I don't want to be building someone else's vision my whole life.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's articulated really well, actually. Yeah, I don't want to, like, you absolutely need people around you to help build your vision. Absolutely, you need the support. But what I was doing, it was like, you know,
it wasn't feeding you at the same time.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
So it was time for a shift. And although it was, I mean, oh my God, was it hard. The first month, I don't know how many breakdowns I had. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? This is the biggest mistake I've ever made. Because at the time I was actually making more than my husband before I quit my job and went back to school.
Yes.
You know, like, holy crap, what have I done? Because again, science, it was a completely foreign language to me. And I had to learn this new way of thinking. So it was tough, but obviously I came out of it okay. And and funny enough, I mean, I love it. I absolutely love it now. I live and breathe it. So
wow. So, and that's a whole separate conversation about teachers and how they impact and influence us when we're young too, right? Because I'm sure if someone had presented this to you in a certain way, you wouldn't have dropped out on it back in the day.
Probably not. Right. Yeah. I mean, and the thing is that I've always loved doing research. I mean, I went to university for law. I was going to become a lawyer. You know, I loved like burying my face in books. I absolutely love it, and problem solving and all that kind of stuff. And you know, so it's not that I didn't like studying. The science thing just, you know, at 15, 16 years old did not interest me whatsoever. I thought, I'm never going to use this. I'm never going to need it, you know, and that's how we think at 15, 16 years old.
Well, we know so much at 15, right? Like, we're just...
Oh, yes.
Yes, we were so smart back then. Had every...
Absolutely.
Every answer, under the sun
Yep.
at 15.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. And I remember when I had to get my teacher, my science teacher, to sign the form to approve me dropping out. And all he said to me, he looked down at me because he was much taller than me, and he said, quitting science is like quitting breathing. You're gonna regret this one day.
Really?
And I was like, whatever. Yeah. He said that to me, and I was like, whatever. See you later. Like, well, he was right. He was right. It took me a while to learn. Whatever.
Yeah. That wisdom that we get later in life. That's crazy.
What about you? How did you get into what you're doing? Have you always been like an active kid, and
oh yeah, absolutely.
It was just kind of like an organic progression?
I don't know. I wonder if it's an organic progression, but I mean, the Coles Note version of it is I played, sports growing up, went to university for football, I guess to get an education too. And then I wanted to do architecture, didn't get into architecture, decided to do social work, went on to do my master's in social work and like marriage and family therapy and counseling and all that fun stuff.
Cool.
And then from there, started working with the youth at risk and was still taking kids to the gym. So as I was spending time with kids going to the gym, I had a friend who was a personal trainer, and I didn't even know that was a job. It's like, are you kidding me? You just get to work out for a living? So, and she's like,
yeah.
you would love it. So I took CanFit Pro, did a weekend course, but then was mentored by her. So while I was doing social work, I was hanging out with her, helping her train hockey teams and teams like that. And then she decided to go off to university. And at that point, I had to choose because the kids I was working with, I was making more headway talking with them over the bench press than in a counseling setting. And,
wow.
And then this girl now was going to hand me her whole book of business. And I had to make the decision. I was like, you know what? I already have my master's. I can fall back on my degree if this doesn't work. And I've been doing it ever since. And that was 2002. So here I am. So I did personal training forever, got into Pilates because it really helped my back, and did it for my own self-interest. Eventually did Peak Pilates, got my full certification there, and just been diving in deeper and deeper and deeper. Like you said, like self-exploration. I landed at doing an apprenticeship, and got to learn from some fantastic teachers there. And I just continued to just, dive deep on the Pilates thing. Especially when I realized, one, there's not that many men that weren't dancers, definitely not that many visible minorities. And I was like, there's not too many brothers that are teaching Pilates around here. So
very true.
Let's do it. And so I've been doing that. And now I have like Real Men Do Pilates. That's my handle, where I encourage men to just be courageous and try something new and, get my athletes to do it because it's a missing link for their sport. And yeah.
Yes.
This is what we do now. And I meet people like you who are just doing amazing work. And it's like, man, and you're in Stouffville. I had to find you on Instagram to realize that you're like around the corner.
I know, right? It's interesting that you say that about men in Pilates. When there's one, again, going back to Mike Prebag, there's one summer I did a mentorship program with him. He offers a mentorship program, and he works with hockey players in their off season.
Okay.
And so I remember sitting there, like watching him do his work and whatever, and hearing all the guys talk about just stuff. Like they talk about their families, they talk about, how they're feeling and everything. Hockey players, by the way, are really sensitive guys. So I have met some really spectacular men out there that are professional hockey players, and they're the most respectable guys I think that I've ever come across. Amazing. Anyways, that was just a little side note.
Yes.
I remember being there in the room, and there was like maybe 8 or 10 of them. And one of the guys was coming in for a treatment from Mike, and he asked Mike, he's like, Mike, how long is my treatment going to be? Because I got Pilates after this. It's just like,
oh yeah.
I was like, okay, yeah. So one guy was doing Pilates, one guy was doing eccentrics, one guy was doing ballet. I mean, they all, and yoga, like
yes.
They all do this stuff that, the professionals are doing. And I wish I wish there was more of that, more exposure, because
yes.
I mean, like my husband is, he's a guy's guy. He's a cyclist. He does snowboarding and all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, he did rugby when he was a kid. Like he's very, very athletic. And when his back is bothering him, he'll come out and say, can we do a Pilates session tonight? Because my back is hurting. I'm like, of course, man.
Sure.
Like, I wish there was more exposure as far as like the benefits of Pilates and how it makes you feel. Because I know when I'm feeling shitty and my back is not so good, I do a Pilates session, I'm good to go, man.
Yeah,
it's instantaneous.
It like self-corrects itself.
Totally.
You know, when Troy McCarty was on, he was talking about working with the Cleveland Cavaliers basketball team. He would say that guys they would be out of town and they'd call from the plane and be like, can you please open the studio? You know, it's 9 o'clock at night and it's a Sunday. We're just flying in. My back's jacked up. Can you just open up for me, please? And then he'd go down, open up, have like Kevin Love or Dove Dover, one of these guys back in the day, come in and do their work.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it makes you feel like, and I remember when my studio was still open, I would teach Pilates a couple times a week at group classes. And I remember one student, after she was done one of my classes, she would come every single week to every single one of my Pilates classes. And she said to me, she's like, is that strange that when I feel like I've just had a massage every time I do Pilates? I'm like, oh no, that's not strange. That's exactly how it should feel. Like it does. Like yes. You know, I love my yoga from, you know, a spiritual connecting aspect for myself and getting in tune with myself. But the Pilates is like, it's my self-therapy.
Yes.
You know, I can't give myself a massage. So you know, but Pilates gives me that feeling of just having a massage and just moving things around in a controlled way. It does really good things for my nervous system.
Yes, absolutely. And that makes me think about, you know, I've done yoga in the past, and there's been times I've had some kind of ups and downs in my life, and I didn't know too much. Well, I guess I did know about Pilates because I had a certification in Pilates at the time. But I was going to yoga, and I found that the purpose it served for me was being able to just center myself, to be able to focus on my breathing and to have the luxury of forgetting about what was happening around me for an hour. And there was a stillness that I was able to find within myself in yoga. And there was a power in that. And Pilates serves a different purpose. And I find like my Pilates is very corrective, is very powerful, is very fluid, is all these different things. But I mean, I'm sure you can find strength and power in yoga as well. I'm not discounting that, but for me, the purpose was centering and breath being in a place for me to escape from reality and be very, very aware of my nowness, if that's the sense. Is that the word?
Oh yeah, sure. And it can do the opposite too. Like it's, you know, it can give you that escape, but it can also give you a space to let things surface, right?
For
to
good
face
or for bad.
The not so, oh yeah,
yes.
And to face the not so good, the not so nice stuff, you know?
Right.
It can be that too. I know it was that for me, especially in the beginning. That, you know, just before I became a yoga teacher, I don't know if you're aware, but I make it very well known. I'm an open book about it. I'm in recovery. I'm a recovering alcoholic. So
yes, I think I saw that in one of your posts. Yes.
So, you know, when I really got into the practice of yoga, you know, a lot of junk surfaced that I wasn't prepared for, because I had to face some demons, and those demons came out on my mat. And
it's like an ambush.
You know, yoga, totally, because I mean, I would find myself like crying uncontrollably on my mat, either, you know, before, during, or after the practice. And I thought, where is this coming from? And then I realized that you know, all these things started coming into light, that what I'm doing on my mat is not, it's not being reflected into my daily life. I wasn't taking what I was doing on my mat and taking it off my mat and living my life as a responsible individual. I was getting fucking hammered every night, right? So it was like, that's, you know, yoga didn't save me, but it was definitely a catalyst into, you know, things have got to change. Things have got to change. So, you know, and I mean, you know, besides the fact that I had a mini intervention and it was like total chaos. Just, you know, just a minor detail. I had a little mini intervention from my husband and my family, but, you know, that's another story for another day. But the thing is that yoga especially early on in my recovery, it was the one consistent thing that I could hang on to.
Yes.
And that I knew no matter what I could turn to. That was the only thing that I could really control at the time was my practice.
Yes, I was going to say that,
you know,
that sense of control, as small as it is, if we have like one area, like even if it's like one thread of control in our lives, sometimes that is enough of a catalyst to keep us pulling, right? And
exactly. You know, and there were days that I was practicing 3, 4, 5 times a day. Because, and it wasn't for the physical,
right?
It was just to, you know, again, either that escape or just like get into myself, make peace with, you know, the person that I was and the person that I want to become.
Yes.
You know, my potential, it was all brewing, right? And, you know, that's the magic of yoga. That's, like, you know, like you said, Pilates, awesome, serves an amazing purpose, but it doesn't have the same thing as yoga. I ran too. I did long distance running. Didn't have the same effect. And everyone's different. I mean, I'm talking from my own experience. And I'm not saying that everyone's going to have, right. And I'm not saying that everyone's going to have the exact same reaction or benefit of doing yoga. Everyone's different. For some people, long distance running does that for them. You know, for me, it didn't. Yoga was the only thing that has been a constant in my life since the very beginning of my recovery and until now. And it's part of my life.
Absolutely.
It just is.
Well, my wife also teaches yoga, and when she had her knee surgery, she had her ACL and some like a whole, you know, process there. So at that time we did Pilates as part of her recovery, and that was really all from like day one. Okay, what can you do?
Awesome.
Let's figure it out. And her yoga background, understanding the poses and how some are like the hip opening are, you know, is like a healing position and all these different things. There's all these different components to the origins of each yoga exercise. There was points where she would go into a yoga pose and just weep. Weep.
Yeah. I know. There's something magical about that.
Yeah. I wish she was on right now. She would, you know, explain like what position it was and whatever, but like, there's a healing that comes to the body through that. And like you said, everyone, you know, someone can find that running, someone can find that in Pilates. But like she found that with yoga poses in the midst of our Pilates, in the midst of, you know, the stuff that we were doing. And, you know, and that kind of ties into what I was going to ask you originally when I realized that you were, you know, an RMT, yoga and Pilates person. When do you put on which hat?
Good question. That's a really good question. It's one hat.
I kind of thought that was going to be the answer.
One hat. Yeah. You know, so the way I approach my treatments and my teaching, it's all the same. It's because one, for me anyways, one cannot exist without the other. When I'm teaching a yoga class, I mean, I am absolutely respecting the tradition of yoga, and the practice of yoga, but I will always, it's weird. It's totally subconscious. Pilates will always sneak in there somehow. You know what I mean? You know, and then the why, as to why we're doing a certain sequence or why we're doing a certain posture, that's my RMT clinical brain coming into the mix.
Oh,
right?
I see. Okay.
So for example, like right now I do a lot of online privates. I have a handful of people that I do weekly online privates with. And I love doing those because I can really cater. I've always loved privates, whether it's in person or on Zoom or whatever, because I can really customize that session for that individual, how they're feeling that day, that moment, that hour, right?
Absolutely.
So, you know, for example, you know, someone will say, you know, before we start the session, you know, I'll ask them, you know, how you feeling today? What's going on? You know, how was your day? Get a little bit of dialogue going, so that first they have the opportunity to get anything off their chest that they need to. Because I think it's really important to be, you know, okay emotionally and mentally before we move. I think that's really, really important for our nervous system and just our state of mind. So for example, you know, I'll have one person say, you know, I've been at my desk all day. I only got up maybe like 1 or 2 times to eat or go to the bathroom. My neck is killing me. So right there, I start thinking, okay, so, you know, does it hurt when you do this? So I do an assessment.
Yes.
Right. I do an assessment of their movement, where the movement's restricted, where pain is, discomfort, whatever, stiffness, things like that. And then I will, you know, focus the whole session around, you know, trying to alleviate some tension, some pain there. So, you know, maybe I'll include some self-massage with some massage balls. All my students have their own massage balls. You know, I'll do some Pilates neck work, you know, and then take that, the same Pilates stuff, and incorporate it into a yoga posture and do some neck strengthening in a yoga posture while they're in a, you know, in triangle or an extended side angle. You know, are they using their neck? That, you know, things like that. So my mind is constant. So it's almost like the clinical comes in first. Right. And then it's like I'll pull from whatever discipline I need to, DNS, Pilates, yoga, and kind of meld it all together.
Yes.
So it's
very cool. So the question then, I'm sure you do this, but like it sounds like you can go all wherever you want, but are you communicating where you went to the client?
Okay, so they'll often answer that question themselves, because at the end of the session, or I'll do a follow-up like text or phone call or email, whatever, you know, how you feeling? Feel great. Awesome. My neck pain's gone. Perfect. That's all I needed to know.
Yeah.
You know?
Right, yes.
You know, I think because I have, you know, long-standing relationships with my clients, my patients, and my students,
thanks, Tamara.
they kind of know that, okay, so Izzy's not doing this for shits and giggles. I know that there's a purpose behind this. You know, I'm not just doing it just to throw in a posture and to throw in a movement. There is a reason for it.
Right.
And often what I'll do too is, this is what's so great about one-on-ones and private sessions, is that I can give them something to do during the session, and I'll say to them, you know, I'll ask them, how does that feel? How's that feeling?
Yes.
And you know, because I'm giving them an opportunity to have their own personal agency, they can say to me openly, actually, that's not feeling so great. Okay, so then try this instead.
Right.
And it's just through my, you know, and a lot of times, like, new teachers will ask me, like, how did you know how to do that? And honestly, it's trial and error.
It's trial and error. You just ask.
Totally.
Yes.
You just ask. Because the thing is that I know what works in my body.
Yes.
100%.
Right.
Sure. And I can suspect that you might feel, get the same benefit from what I do, but not all the time. So, okay, so if that doesn't work, try with your head at this angle, or try with your shoulder this way, or whatever. Try with your arm behind your back or up or whatever. See how that feels. It's like, let's work this out together and figure out what works. Exactly. It's a team effort. Who am I to dictate what's right for you? I don't know.
Right. Exactly.
Right. I have the education, and I have some knowledge, which is changing all the time. You know, I have resources, but at the end of the day,
it's your practice.
It may not work, and totally, and that's okay. That's okay. And you have to be. I think what makes a good therapist an excellent therapist, and a good teacher an excellent teacher, is that ability to admit that either A, I'm wrong, or B, I don't know, or both.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The center that I'm in is a multidisciplinary clinic as well. So I was speaking with a chiro and also one of the RMTs, athletic therapists, this morning, and we landed at this, that only thing we're coming with is a hypothesis.
Yep.
That's really all I'm coming to the table with. And then
100%.
And from there, then we ask her questions. We do, oh, that worked. Okay, let's go that way. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, let's go this way instead. But we have our knowledge, and we have a hypothesis as to what's going to work for you today. And then go.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we need to do to make our work effective is listen. We got to listen. We got to listen to the person in front of us, you know? I was saying this, actually, I was talking about this with Caitlin Casella on her podcast not too long ago. And, you know, a lot of the times, not a lot, but often there's a huge, I mean, here's the thing. Okay, I'm going all over the place right now. Pain is really subjective,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And you know, pain science is a science. But what pain is our interpretation of the input that our nervous system is receiving.
Yes.
Right? So it's perception. So the thing is that what we also know now through science and through studies is that our emotional state and our mental state has a direct relation to how we feel.
Yes.
And how we feel pain.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So if I have someone coming to me, and I have this, I consider it a gift that when I have someone come into the room or even, you know, on a screen, I can sense if something isn't right. You know, if they're not feeling, if something's going on,
yes.
You know,
yes.
So I take that opportunity. I mean, I always ask everybody, you know, how you doing? And the first reaction, people, because we're human and this is what we do. Oh, I'm good.
I'm good. I'm fine.
I'll often, yeah, I'm good. Or I'm fine. Yeah, things are good. And I'll sometimes if I can sense something's going on, I'll follow it up with, are you sure? Right?
Yes.
And that's when the floodgates open.
Absolutely.
Quite often, right? Like,
yes.
Are you sure? And then they'll say, actually, and then the story goes. And then go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I find that are you sure is not just are you sure, it's also saying I'm giving you permission to actually say what's going on.
You got it. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so when we can give someone that space to get something off their chest that's maybe weighing, you know, it could be really, really heavy. It could not be, could be not so heavy. It could be just something that pissed them off through, you know, early on in the day, but it's off. Yeah, whatever. It's off. It's out of their body. It's out of their mouth. Then they can focus on other things, right? But if they're stuck in their head and they're holding on to a resentment or an anger or frustration and it's in there the whole time that they're moving, it's not to say that the workout or the session isn't going to be as effective, but it's more effective if we can, you know, if we can let that cack go, you know what I mean? Just get rid of it just for a little bit, right? Because I think it's very, what's the word I'm not looking for? Not presumptuous. I don't think it's fair for us. I mean, you hear it a lot in a yoga class, like, you know, just let your day go.
Yeah, that's not,
you know, just for the next, it's like,
that's not fair.
Really? You're asking me to let this go? Maybe someone, you know, lost a pet recently or got in a brutal fight with their partner or, you know, whatever. And I'm going to, as a teacher, say, just let that go for the next hour. Like,
it's so funny you say that. So we have like 1 minute and 50 seconds left, first of all, which is like crazy how fast this
goes. Geez.
But I think what the word you're looking for is dignity. We have to give dignity to people's experience.
Absolutely.
And not just discount it by saying, okay, well, just let all the stuff go so we can have a good yoga practice today. Or let that go so we can really work good in our Pilates. It's like, no, let's give that space. Let's take, because that is going to be just as effective a workout if they speak for 50 minutes about their issue and move for 10, as if they just move for 50 with no regard to what's going on in their world.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. That's it. That's it. We need to be able to hold each other, you know?
Thank you for your time. That was crazy fast.
Thank you. Holy, yeah, that felt like 10 minutes.
That felt like 10 minutes. Man.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll definitely do a round 2. I will send you.
I would love to.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you messages later with our recap or just like the highlights of this or like the whole replay.
Awesome.
So you can forward to your people. And in 45 seconds, thank you so much for your time. I really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. You're a blessing. Thank you.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna sign you off and Sarah, goodbye, Sarah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.